One could get resettled, that would be wonderful.
So Brian, while you're waiting on that,
there's the value of paper. I love paper.
Okay. Well, we'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome tonight. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. If you wish to do so, we ask that you come to the podium, be recognized by myself, and you'll have 5 minutes to make your comments. For accurate recording and broadcasting purposes, we ask that everyone present please speak as directly as possible into one of our microphones. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alvey? Walters?
Here.
Murguia?
here.
Townsend?
Here.
McKiernan?
Here. Our first item is approval of our Standing Committee minutes from our March 3rd, 2014 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the Standing Committee minutes of March 3rd. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. The first item on our committee agenda tonight is our quarterly investment report by Mr. Lou Levin.
Good evening, Commissioners. This first item's our quarterly investment report is in addition budget revisions that occurred in the first quarter requiring reporting to this committee and the Commission. No actions required on these items. I'll briefly, just a few brief comments on the investment report. For the first quarter, if you turn to the summary table, you'll see the amount of total investments as of the first quarter at $144 million, average interest rate 0.5%, and interest earnings through the first quarter little under $100,000. The investments are listed by institution. You can see if we look at the maturity date of those investments, they're spread out over a 4-year period, and we do that to try to in this time period of low interest rates, just to maximize any interest earnings potential. With that said, if there's any questions on the investment report, I'll take those questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Hi. I did have a question. Looking at the investment by type page that you just referred to, I see a couple of these, particularly for Liberty Bank, are near their maturity date. What happens when we reach the maturity date? Do you just roll those over? What happens with them?
It depends. When we look closely at our available cash, we have a model that we project what our cash needs are and our likelihood of when we'll need those monies. At this time of the year, I'll say we have more cash on hand because of the receipt of property tax payments, and then we did our annual bond financing and temporary note financing at the beginning of the year. And so we have those monies available to us, and we forecast through the end of the year if we're going to need those monies and if we have the ability to invest it. With Liberty Bank, I think you referred to, there's, I think we have a couple smaller investments with them, and the local bank emphasis that those we do offer every institution in the county on an annual basis if they want to invest up to $95,000, and so they'll have that opportunity. And the others will, investments are done on a competitive bid basis, and so if we decide, and we're going to look at the end of April, coming up shortly, and do an estimate if we have the ability to put some of our cash on hand out for an investment, but it will be done on a competitive basis.
Okay. So, for instance, the one at Liberty that will mature in the middle of May, depending upon our cash position, we may or may not reinvest or take out another.
Yeah, I think the Liberty investment, and I'll look at it. I think there were two investments we must have timed. You see they mature 8/28/15, and we had $7 million with Cap Federal and $1 million with Liberty. And I think we must have went out, when we placed those investments in December of 2012, we went out for $8 million. In Liberty at that time, my sense is they said, we'll take $1 million, and they offered a certain price or rate with that amount, and then Capital said they would take the remainder. And in actually looking at the numbers, I'm guessing, I think there's a error on this report where it says 0.05%. It's probably 0.55%, I believe, on the Liberty number.
And that was on the amount on which one? I was looking at the one that was a little bit under 100,000.
Yeah, on that one, the one that's under 100,000, they'll have the opportunity to renew that investment if they so choose.
Okay.
I was looking at the one midway down on the page where it had the one that matures August 28, 2015.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I was just wondering how, what the procedure was for whether or not we reinvest when they mature or what happens. So it kind of depends on what our cash position is at the time.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, comments, or questions? This item was informational only, so we thank you very much for that presentation. That brings us to item number 2, which is an ordinance request for the Happy Foods Project. Also, Mr. Levin.
Yeah, I didn't get to the budget revision part.
I'm sorry.
Reginald's here to speak on those.
First quarter, we had 3 budget revisions. One was for the Sheriff's Department, one was also for Public Works, and then one that recently passed this past Thursday, which was for the YMCA. These 3, they all represent policies that we recently passed with our budget policy. One was where if something is under $50,000, the administrator can approve it. Then the others are if there's over $50,000 and it's part of operations, the administrator can approve it with approval also the mayor or the mayor pro tem. And then if it's over $50,000 and it's discretionary, it has to go to commission review. And that's the one that was approved by commission on Thursday night.
Any questions, comments, discussion on that?
Okay?
It would appear that we now have wrapped up item number 1.
That is correct.
We have plenty of time this time. All right, that does bring us to item number 2, which is an ordinance request for the Happy Foods project.
Yeah. Actually, I'll combine my discussion to both items number 2 and 3. We have 2 financings that we're doing concurrently. They're for 2 transportation districts, the first being Happy Foods, a grocery store at approximately 55th and Leavenworth Road. We currently have in place a 1% transportation tax that both, and the second is for Prescott Plaza. Both of those transportation districts were established in 2009. We had initially, I'll say, shorter-term financings. We had 4-year financings in place for each of those. The Happy Foods one is actually, that financing, we have a payment due June 1st that would, I'll say, terminate that financing, and we want to extend that another 10 years. At the same time, actually, our Prescott financing, our final payment is due next year, but we found it easier to go to the market on both financings concurrently, which we're doing. The Happy Foods one, and now I'll treat them separately, is the outstanding principal on that debt is $340,000. The initial temporary note, or the initial note for that transportation district was $400,000. We're looking at a 10-year financing. We're doing it competitively. We have 4 local banks that have indicated an interest in that financing, and we're actually taking proposals from the banks. Their proposals are due tomorrow on April 29th. We would then make certain over the next 2 weeks that those proposals we're in agreement with those proposals, and we would take final approval action to the commission on May 15th.
So just as a refresher on TDDs, because I think I understand them, but I may not. So is this where they are going to keep a percentage of the sales tax for the grocery store?
We've already incurred the expense. So the expense was incurred up front, and we're paying back the expenditure over time. The transportation district allows for 22 years to pay that expense back. I guess one additional item I wanted to mention was that we have an annual appropriation backing for both of these transportation districts, meaning that if there's a revenue shortfall from that 1% sales tax, the government would make up that shortfall. For both of these, we have not had to use that annual appropriation pledge. There's been sufficient revenues generated from the project.
But, so wait a minute. So the sales tax, a percentage of the sales tax generated from Happy Foods Grocery.
It's actually not a percent, it's an additional 1% sales tax.
Okay. So an additional 1% sales tax that's generated at this grocery has to meet a certain threshold. And if it doesn't, then per the development agreement, our government has agreed to take money from our general fund and pay that difference.
I'm not certain it was originally in the development agreement. It was always part of the financing that to get the project financed, the government authorized or provided the annual appropriation pledge. And so that's done on an annual basis as part of the budget process.
So it's not part of the development agreement, it's an annual appropriation that the commission could decide to stop funding if it ever was to fund it.
The commission could decide not to do it. If the commission decided not to do it, and we had made the sale of these bonds with that annual appropriation pledge, it would not be looked upon positively by, I'll say, the institutional marketplace. It would be an indication that we provided an annual appropriation pledge, and then at some point in the future, we backed away from that pledge.
But you said it wasn't part of the development agreement.
Well, it's part of this financing.
Yeah, I think we went out and got the money for the projects to happen 5 years ago.
Okay.
So, I mean, and to your first point, no, none of this money went to the developments themselves. It all went, or to the developers. It all went for infrastructure related. The TDD is similar to a CID that we use more robustly today, except for you can't use it for as many things as you can a CID. It's restricted more to the infrastructure of the project, the roads and stuff like that around it. We did this around both the projects area, put the 1% on it to do the road projects and work around both these areas, parking lots that were eligible for it, funded them, the work is done, the 1% TDD has paid for the service on those bonds every year, and they're just back today to say, okay, it's time to refinance these structures.
Okay, but before you get there, just because I have a question, because I wasn't on the commission when Prescott Plaza was done, but I have been on the commission since other grocery stores have been done. So my question is that there is no way this project can fail, because the differential, if this grocery store does not perform, or Prescott Plaza does not perform, the government will pay the difference. Is that correct?
If, with our annual appropriation pledge, if...
But it doesn't matter. I mean, I guess, Lou, the deal is this. We went out and borrowed a bunch of money, millions of dollars, to build Prescott Plaza. And we said, if the deal itself could not perform and make the payments back to pay for this, the government would make that payment for them in essence.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Bach said is accurate. We said as part of the development agreement, we were going to make some transportation-related improvements, and we were using the TDD tool to do that. And so as part of that, the developer agreed to implement a 1% transportation district tax, and we've provided our annual appropriation backing to it.
Right, but we require developers on all developments to do transportation-like things that normally wouldn't be incurred or wouldn't have to necessarily do with the business that's being located there. We require developers all the time to do street improvements and sewer improvements and infrastructure improvements, and we don't offer to use general obligation money or annual appropriations to buy down debt if they don't perform, correct?
Well, in some instances, we've provided a stronger pledge. We've provided a general obligation pledge to the development.
But the business has to perform to ensure that that general obligation debt will be paid back, correct?
Well, when we've provided the general obligation pledge, I guess we're assuming, or we believe that the development will occur to cover that debt service.
But if it doesn't, the developer or the owner of the property is responsible for that debt.
No, and not if we have a general obligation bond pledge, we are totally responsible. If we have an annual the developer is not behind the financing on this. This is our debt at this time.
So all the people that we've issued general obligation debt to could just walk away and not pay that general obligation debt if they didn't want to? And there'd be no recourse for that?
Well, if it's part of a TIF project, in our development agreement, we have the pledge of the TIF revenues generated from that project. If the project doesn't perform to the level that's projected, there may be a revenue shortfall.
But the project has to perform. And if it doesn't, somebody's responsible for that.
If the government's providing a pledge, if we have a project that's strictly based on project revenues and there's not a government backing behind it, then then there's a higher level of risk for the purchaser of the debt.
So I'm a little bit confused, and I guess I need to understand this because I've been here a long time and I should understand it, and I don't. So you're saying unless there's, the general obligation debt is where the government goes out, we borrow that money to finance the development, correct? And
I'll give you the hierarchy for 3 examples. Plaza at the Speedway, for example, we have a special obligation bond debt. The there's area banks have purchased the debt. We have issued the debt. We as a government are of the issuer of the debt. We have a pledge of a certain portion of sales tax revenue and property tax increment. If Plaza at the Speedway does not generate sufficient revenue from those pledges, that is the sole source of revenue for that. There's no government backing. The next level of backing would be an annual appropriation pledge. In that instance, where Prescott Plaza, Happy Foods are examples, we're saying the primary revenue source for those financings are the Transportation Development District, and if there's a shortfall in revenue, the government will budget on an annual basis monies for those projects. I'll just finish the third one. The third example would be the general obligation pledge. The Metropolitan TIF project, we have provided a general obligation pledge, and so our revenue source for that is TIF increment. However, if the TIF increment is not sufficient, the government has given its full faith and credit that we'll levy property tax sufficient to cover the debt service on that. And that's a commitment for the term of the bond. It's a 20-year commitment as opposed to the annual appropriation commitment, or in the case of where there's just a commitment from the revenues solely generated by the project.
Right, but the developer that owns the development, I can see you having to continue to pay the bill through an annual appropriation, but the person or the entity that owns the project, are you telling me the government doesn't have any agreement with them to hold them accountable for that debt? Any other agreement?
It would be whatever the term. We talked about this, just last week when we adopted our modified our economic development policy as it related to TIFs. There's different terms or different requirements you can put into the development agreement, and I think we're going to make an effort going forward, and we have to an extent in the past, but it's strictly based whatever terms are in that development agreement.
Right, but I don't think we're making annual appropriation payments on I don't think it's our obligation without some recourse with our development partner, except for, it sounds like, with the Prescott Plaza project. We have some recourse.
I'm not certain what that recourse is that you're referring to.
So you don't have any recourse. There is no personal guarantee on other developments. There's no additional financing on any other developments that the developer would be...
There's not a personal guarantee on Prescott Plaza or Happy Foods.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. And that makes them different from other kinds of TIF general obligation developments.
I'm not certain of an example where we have a personal guarantee on a TIF general obligation development.
So you're saying on all general obligation debt, if it doesn't generate the expected revenue that was expected through the pro forma, that the unified government, as part of an annual appropriation process, will make up that difference on every development agreement that we have?
No, it depends on each individual development agreement.
I guess I'll need a class in that later on.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the question you're getting to. I mean, it really does come down to each individual agreement.
Right, and that's all I was asking, is there seems, I didn't
And
really...
on these two, on the TDD portions that are there, the TDD portion that we're refinancing now is strictly backed from the revenue of the 1% with RGO behind it. So it's been funded, both these projects pay the 1% is enough to
Sure.
pay them off. But there is, if it drops and falls short, yeah, there's no other recourse on these TDDs.
Right, there'd be an annual appropriation issued by the Unified.
Right, we'd go to it and say, we need $100,000 to make this payment. It looks like it's only going to generate 83, so we're going to need $17,000.
And is that the case on other TDDs? Is it the same agreement? Where the
no.
unified government would be making an annual appropriation?
I mean, I would have to pull them all out and see, but I would say that recently, I would say the CIDs we've done, no, we're not behind them.
That's what I thought.
We
I
have
think we-
two other TDDs. The Legends has a TDD, and there's not a government pledge on that one.
Right,
And then I mentioned Plaza the Speedway, there's not a government pledge on that one.
And we have several other CIDs, and we're not pledged behind them. I mean, there's some that there is a structure where we are back there, but as a rule, our first rule is not to be behind it. I mean, that's where we
Right.
start.
Right.
Can the CID do it? And you sell the CID based on the sales tax revenue that's coming from the project and go on its own.
Right. And some projects obviously are more risky than others, based on, where
These
they're
were-
located or the challenges in that.
The Happy
particular-
Foods, getting it started back up was a very challenging project when it came about. It's a pretty small dollar amount, relatively speaking, to some of the bigger projects. And then Prescott Plaza was an extremely challenging project where we went and did.
Well, we put actual cash, we actually wrote a check to Happy Foods. We did. We authorized CDBG funding to be given to Happy Foods grocery store. That's in addition to the financing that we've done. Just for clarity. I remember
Okay.
it. And then, so Prescott Plaza, I was just curious what was the difference between other urban groceries. So I understand now.
Okay.
I just wanted to be clear.
All right?
Any other discussion or questions on these?
Yeah, I think you need to take action on each one individually. I guess the only other comment I would add on Prescott Plaza, it's been performing very well. Our annual TDD revenue is is over $200,000 a year. It was originally a $2 million debt with the project. In 4 years, we've retired almost $500,000 of debt. And even though this financing's contemplated as a 10-year financing, we believe it will be able to pay it off within 7 years. And so once this debt's paid off, although we have the authority for 22 years, we would terminate that 1% tax at that time.
We had authority for 22 years, but we think we can pay it off in 7?
Well, we're 5 years into it, but within 7 more years, so.
In 7 more years. So in
Yes.
12 years,
Yeah.
but we had authority for 22.
Correct.
And every year we meet, the sales tax meets what the financing obligation is.
Yeah, the way we've restructured these financings, we have an interest-only payment, and then the excess, we're retiring principal.
Great. Thanks.
So it seems to me we have three things before us here. First is item number 3 and item number 4, and the third thing would be a question as to whether or not we might want, 2 and 3.
Item number 2 and item number 3.
But the third thing would be whether or not we want to go back and possibly review the TDD, Economic Development Policy, as we've recently done the TIF, to see if we want to just look at any of the guidelines that are contained therein for future projects. So at this time, for item number 2, there is a request to approve the ordinance and forward it to full commission for adoption.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to forward the ordinance for the Happy Foods. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Then the next item would be there's a request to approve and forward the ordinance for the Prescott Plaza project.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Levin. Having included those, I would say if anybody is interested in going back and reviewing that economic development policy, let's just talk with Mr. Bach, and if there's a desire, then we can put that on the agenda and open that up for our next meeting.
I just think, since we have a couple of relatively new commissioners, and obviously I need to go through it again also, it'd be great to go over TDD and TIF and SID. I mean, I know we just went over TIF, but in general, using some examples of projects where you're actually talking about the details of an economic development deal, I think it could be really helpful, especially to commissioners who I know are interested in seeing more economic development in their districts.
What do I have to do?
Just in sometime in the future, no hurry on it clearly.
Maybe we could get a new project up in front of you, and then we have to go into the details of it to explain. And I'll say this, TDD, it's still an eligible tool that's out there. We haven't brought one forward since CID has been approved by the state legislature, because essentially, as I noted earlier, CID is more robust. Your flexibility as to what you can use it on is kind of phased out TDD, but it's still there. And actually, probably one opportunity could be if you really wanted to layer them together, then I guess you could put them forth. Otherwise, we probably would be coming forth with CIDs. But yeah, we could bring it forward in the future. And maybe it's a chance to review active CIDs, that we have out there, kind of like as we went through the list of TIFs, go through the list of CIDs.
Yeah, because those would be sometimes it's just easier to deal with a real scenario than deal with, like, the way Lou sort of explains it, basically from a financing perspective. It's a little difficult to get a grasp on.
Mr. Brakovich has it on his list.
That brings us to item number 4, both on the original and the blue sheet agendas tonight. And item number 4 follows up a conversation we had last month about the Sporting Kansas City futsal project. At the conclusion of last month's meeting, we had asked that our staff and sporting staff begin to reach out to the commissioners who weren't here, begin to kind of vet the sites that were proposed for the courts, and begin to work with our staff on an amendment to the original development agreement. And so we have an update this month.
Yes, good evening. Doug, you want to go?
Yeah, why don't you let me start, Bob, and then I'll let you guys take it away.
Okay.
Ed put the blue sheet forward for the addendum to come in. We do not have the amendment in a position to bring forth to go over with the commission tonight, so what I had hoped to be a simple agreement as you get into when it's attached to what is a fairly complex document, amending the portions of the fields agreement as it pertains to all sections of the other agreement, just led to many other points that had to be touched on. So we don't have it ready to go tonight. So I just kind of, if we can table that to the next opportunity we have to come forth, and let Bob and, are there any questions on that portion?
I do.
Okay.
So I just have some comments. I wasn't here at the last meeting. Mr. Ficklin, I just want to say it's great to see you, as always.
Thank you.
I have some comments to make, and just hope that you nor Sporting would take them at all. Personally, I'm a big fan of yours and big fan of Sporting KC. I want to tell you and everyone else. I do have some comments to make in general about the proposal. There are 2 new commissioners here, which makes up, 50% of our committee. And so to me, it is very important that they understand the history as I recall it. And I want to share that with them in a very public setting. And, the whole Sporting Kansas City Stadium out in western Wyandotte County came about after I became commissioner in '07. I was fairly new to the commission at the time. And when it came forward, I will tell you, there were because of its location in western Wyandotte County with all of the other development, there were some very vocal commissioners that were unhappy about the location. They really felt as if all the development, they love Sporting Kansas City, nothing against them. It was really more, they felt like all the development was going into western Wyandotte County and nothing was coming into the city. And so at that time, in order to move the stadium along, there's a deals cut, however you want to phrase it. And what came back being proposed is that 3 regulation soccer fields would be positioned in the city, specifically east of 635. So that didn't happen. Solely through the rumor mill, apparently the commission wasn't in agreement on where to locate those 3 soccer fields. But I will tell you, never, ever did a proposal come in front of the full commission for a vote. So if people were unable to come to an agreement, that conversation had to take place behind closed doors. And I was not involved in those discussions directly. Sporting KC was wonderful, and Dave, Mr. Ficklin himself, came out to my district, and we had several discussions, and I dealt with a variety of people at Sporting KC who were fabulous. But as far as internal politics, nothing was ever presented or voted on. However, 2 years passed, and then eventually, I think there was an article in the newspaper, and then shortly thereafter, there was a special session where all commissioners were engaged, where the futsal concept was presented to all of us at that time. And we were all fans of the futsal concept. I think one of the things that was communicated, it might be a better fit for urban neighborhoods east of 635, which were more walkable neighborhoods, where these are walk-to courts that could improve skills in urban kids and create opportunity for them in soccer. And that's how it was sort of pitched to us. I remember this because I actually, over the last 2 weeks, I pulled my notes from that meeting, and I still have them. I know who's there, I know who's in the meeting, and I know almost exactly what was said. We agreed at that time that'd be a good thing, and now it's 2 years later. I don't know, and I guess it doesn't really matter what the delay has been and how from 2 years ago to now. I don't really understand or know what happened. But, so we are today where we're at. And there's 2 things I need to be very open and public about. I'm the 3rd District Commissioner. It's my job to represent the 3rd District. And I think if good things happen in the 3rd District, it's good for all of Wyandotte County. Just like I've been told for 7 years, what happens out west is good for all of Wyandotte County. It goes both ways. So I was a little bit disappointed and surprised when I had to hear maybe a day or 2 prior, not even that, that the futsal fields being proposed were being spread out in each and every commission district, which would mean there'd be some east of 635 and there'd be some west. So, for wrong or right, western Wyandotte County gets a multi-million-dollar soccer stadium, while those east of 635 have to share futsal fields with the rest of the county. I mean, that's just my perception of there was a deal, there was an agreement, that's what was going to happen, and it didn't happen that way. So, all that said, I'm very happy for all these areas, and I could have gotten over that. But then I reviewed the locations of the futsal fields, and I was very disappointed that there is not one located in District 3. Clopper Field is not in District 3. So I'm very disappointed by that. It kind of gives me a very jaded feeling about this proposal. It just seems that it sends a message of insignificance of District 3. So, with all that said, it looks like this has been agreed upon. And I will tell you, I am a huge fan of the programming. I watched the video, even though I wasn't here at the meeting. I did watch it. We tape all our meetings now, and I thought you did a fantastic job with the presentation. Dave. You really did a great job. And the programming around this, I would truly like my district to be part of that. And actually, as the 3rd District Commissioner, as the person that puts their name on a ballot every 4 years and gets elected by more than 50% of the people, I would hope that I would have some say about where that futsal field would go. So I'd like to be part of that, and so would my district. And if we could work that out, then I guess we'll move forward.
Next, or, if we're just in our comments section, I guess this is really not going to be moved on.
Well, I do want to respond to that, because I do believe our direction last month was to check in with any commissioner who was not here and to vet or talk about the location of the proposal that came through in terms of this proposal last month. So I'm disappointed that didn't get done, and I hope that it does get done now.
Yeah, I'll say, there's no final placement in any of the fields. I mean, this map came out 5 weeks ago to the commissioners, so it was there for your input, to give us input on. I would say probably the placement of Clopper Field not being in your district was just probably an oversight of where the district line was. And that's why we set out to find out that input from commissioners over the past few weeks. So it's certainly not done the Skippy thing, and I would say it's your call to give us direction on that.
In fact, if you look at this map up here, you can see 2 commissioners have already commented about the original locations. For example, Commissioner Kane, we had one located out at Wyandotte County Lake Park, and he proposed that instead of being located there, that USD 500 site to be named, be a different site, so, and then you see Stony Point moving to Edwardsville Park. So this is fluid, and I would agree with Doug, we certainly thought that Clopper was in District 3, if that's our air. So there are 2 other parks in District 3, Emerson and Rosedale. We also, when we looked at the different parks, we tried to make sure we avoided areas where we didn't want to interfere with current tennis players or basketball uses. So we were trying to balance, taking an unused field where we had capacity and there seemed to be a lot of interest in soccer to begin with. So for example, a number of these sites like Bethany, if you put a tennis net up tonight, it'll be down tomorrow because they'll be turning it into a futsal court. So that's what we see occurring in some sites, and we're trying to take advantage and build upon that interest in some of these sites. But with that being said, this is a fluid map. I think David would agree.
Yes, Commissioners, we've always said that, or we've tried to make clear that the first proposal is to do 8 additional courts to supplement the 2 at Wyandotte High School. And then the second effort was to spread them 1 in each of the 8 districts. And Commissioner Marghia, let me apologize because I'm sitting here very embarrassed, I'm sure with Mr. Roddy, that we had been proceeding with the understanding that Clopper was in your district. And it was always an intent to put 1 in your district. We had spoken many times about the fact that with the offer of 1 per district, please tell us which one each commissioner chooses as your preferred location within your district.
Right. And we did mention that, I think in the previous meeting, that there is some tripwires. We obviously don't want to interfere with current uses. We don't want to make enemies in the community. We, as much as possible, want to take advantage of underutilized facilities, and we want to select sites where we already have an asphalt surface, to take advantage of that, because we even mentioned that to Edwardsville, if the site would go there, they do not have a tennis court, that the city of Edwardsville would be responsible for putting down the asphalt pad, and they've agreed to that in concept so far. So.
Commissioner Walters? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to give you a report on the committees we saw, the groups we saw, if you're interested.
That'd be fine.
Okay. Since last meeting, we went to 3 different groups. We went to the Park Board on April 9th. They were very supportive. They said that they were going to send us a letter in support. I don't think we've received it yet, but it's in the mail, supposedly. We also met with the Livable Neighborhood Executive Committee on April 17th. They were supportive, and they put the futsal review on the agenda for April 24th. At that meeting, we appeared in front of the entire Livable Neighborhood Group, which is basically, I think there's probably over 40 different organizations represented, and they took a unanimous vote in support of futsal concept. I believe in both the livable neighborhoods and in the Park Board, they were supporting the concept. They weren't saying that the locations that we proposed were the final ones, but they proposed that it was their opinion, I believe, that was a commission call, and they were supportive of the concept. So we were quite, I think, pleased with the results we got with the people we met with. We've also offered to meet with anyone at the livable neighborhoods if they wanted us to come talk. So far, we've not received any requests.
Commissioner Walters.
Thank you. I think this is a great proposal by Sporting Kansas City. I like the direction it's going of putting facilities county-wide rather than trying to concentrate them in one particular area or another. I did look at the original proposal, and I wasn't obviously involved in any of these discussions that Commissioner Murguia was recalling, but in the original development agreement, it says that the developer agrees to construct and maintain 3 recreational soccer fields at locations within Wyandotte County. So, at least in writing, it was never said that they would be concentrated in one particular area, and I really like the idea of spreading them out through the entire county. I don't know about the future, but I could hope that, or I would hope that maybe in the future we have more than 8 or 9 futsal facilities. I know that Stony Point Park is a great candidate for a futsal court, and they may want one. I haven't had a chance to meet with that neighborhood group yet, but plan to, and hope if we can figure out a way to fund the installation of a futsal court there, it might be able to be added into the overall programming that Sporting Kansas City has said will be part of this overall installation. So I'm all for it. I do recall, I thought last month, there was going to be conversations with commissioners from each district. So that might be an opportunity to close these last little loops. And I would encourage full speed ahead.
Commissioner Townsend.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to thank Mr. Roddy for following up on the suggestion made to go to the neighborhood group level. I thought that was important. I met with the Parkwood Neighborhood Association and told them about it. Parkwood will not be on there because they still use the tennis courts there quite a bit. Clam Park is not in First District, so we do not have a First District location. However, I would like to see a full evaluation done of the feasibility of putting one of these at Garland to see if that is something that would work, so that you clearly have one in First District. And I know we can talk about the financing. There is no concrete pad there, but it is in First District. It wouldn't present the problem of football versus tennis versus any other activity or option. So if we could follow up on that. Because these have not been decided upon, what is the target date, if there is one, for kind of nailing down the locations?
I would say I'd operate from the standpoint of once we got an agreement done with Sporting, which I don't have the agreement in front of you tonight, but once we get the agreement and concept done and approved, that says we're going to put the futsal fields, our courts across the districts, without being specific as to what location. I think from Sporting's perspective was they wanted to see them spread out in areas where they'd be utilized, but we could move them around within the district areas. Once that's done, then as soon as a location was identified, and maybe I'd let Mr. Ficklin speak to this point, as soon as we identified firm locations, you'd probably start construction on them.
As
Immediately.
absolutely, as
So
fast
it'd
as we
probably
possibly could,
be,
yes.
the motivation behind that would be those that are finalized, done first, would probably get a go first. And we'd start going, and if there were some that were still indecision about, or you're still working on, I'll use Edwardsville, for example, if we were still trying to work out how we were doing the pad, and that pad had to be poured, then the other ones would probably go before that one would go, or something, but start working like that.
Do we foresee coming to, approving the plan without having to identify specifically the locations?
Well, I guess it depends probably on how specific we get in our development agreement on that point. I think we're able to work with general locations as long as identifying that they're in districts, but at that point, I won't say that's finally agreed to. I don't think we've scripted it that way, but that'd probably be a good way that we may be able to write it down. I don't want to put David on the spot from that standpoint, but that may be a way to do it that allows us just to give us the flexibility to do final placement
Okay, thank you.
with discussion with him.
One closing item, or at least for me anyway. I was the one chosen to contact the commissioners, and I did try to reach out to all commissioners. Unfortunately, I did not make connection with a few, so that is on my shoulders.
Any other discussion? Then continue, and
Okay.
we'll await an update. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to item number 5, which is going to be presented by Mr. Brakovich, I believe.
Thank you, Commissioner. George Brakovich with Economic Development. We're here tonight to talk about a new project that we're really excited about. It's a good community partner for us in the past, and we love the fact that they're doing one of their own projects within the community as well. It's a project that's kind of come together fairly quickly. I was just looking through my notes, and it was really late March, earlier this month that we in full force started those discussions. Greg Kendall with Wyandotte Economic Development Council was instrumental in kind of getting everybody together and to ensure that we could proceed down a fairly quick path. So maybe real quick, let everyone kind of do some introductions, and I'll keep my comments pretty brief after that too.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kurt Peterson with the Polsinelli Law Firm here on behalf of J.E. Dunn, and with me is Patrick Lease from J.E. Dunn. And really, a very quick overview, and I can hand the baton back to Mr. Brakovich. This is a significant expansion from Missouri operations into Kansas for J.E. Dunn. The site, approximately a 20-acre site, would be the site of building up over 4 to 5 years, 65 employees, and the operations there would be a equipment rental facility, so you'd have an overhead crane to move things around, and you have different equipment that they lease out both to a J.E. Dunn affiliate entity, then also third parties, so you'd have good property value, property tax, have some sales from the site, and just, if I can say, great activity, especially for that part of our county. Just a great place to put some development, very capital intensive, a good approximately $10 million investment, not to mention, as Mr. Brakovich put in the staff notes, really when you add all the equipment that will be brought into the county, you're talking more of a plus or minus $45 million investment, if you think of that as an investment as well. So a good-sized project with a lot of activity in this part of the county. And again, Patrick's here, so he can answer any operational questions you might have or any questions for me.
Maybe just real quick, in case you're not familiar with the site, so Turner Diagonal, and you've got I-70 here in Kansas Avenue. This is west on K-32 until you get to South 65th Street, and it's this 22 give or take, acre site that's currently vacant. I did talk to Rob Richardson. I guess in the past, there was another proposal for use here as kind of an open yard site, and so I think there's been some work like that done in the past. It is a stoplight exchange here as well. So the one thing we looked at is, obviously, we love the economic impact of the project coming in. Just to kind of give you a rough idea, the base taxes right now off that 22-acre site are about $1,600 annually. We think the project, they've submitted an IRB application. We're reviewing it under our tax abatement policy, but we think it'll qualify for a 65% abatement on a 10-year pilot. Even doing a 65% abatement, we think year one taxes are going to be $90,000 to $100,000 on the site. So again, going from $1,600 to the $100,000. And then obviously, maybe the pilot discussion, what we hope to do is come back before the full commission then on May 15th to actually hold the public hearing in accordance with statutory guidelines and give you all the details at that time. But we are extremely excited about the impact here. Yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify. We're actually approving this item in terms of the development, not just to conduct a public hearing, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So
It was
approving the item, and that will include a public hearing at that later date.
Yes.
Great.
The way we've done that in the past is the IRBs don't, some of the statutory requirements for things like TIF, you have to approve a resolution to set the public hearing. With IRBs, you just publish it in your, we'll do it in the ECHO. And so this is kind of informational for you, but ultimately that it comes back before the full commission as a public hearing.
Okay. So the motion, the request before us then is to approve this item to be brought to full commission for approval, which will include a public hearing at that time.
Correct.
All right.
Move for approval.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve as requested. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
If there's any discussion about the amount of abatement or anything else, that would be entertained, or could be entertained at the full hearing. Right.
Yeah, we'll do a full presentation on what parts of the tax abatement policy they qualify for and how that calculation was arrived at.
Thank you.
But if you have questions about it now, we can entertain it. I mean, I think George is projecting where it's at, so we certainly would take that today.
I'm not quite sure if I guess when I looked at 65%, I don't know for this type of project if that is average, above average. Now, when you ran the numbers, though, you're saying as this sits now, base tax is $1,600.
Correct.
If I wrote this correctly, you're saying even with 65% abatement, you're talking about $100,000?
Correct. Yeah. So, our standard abatement starts at 45% for 5 years. So based on their level of investment, they ought to go from a 5-year term to the 10-year term. And I think the points of the policy that we're looking at here are total investment and LMW participation goals for the construction phase of the project. And I think with those two, we can get close to that 65%. But again, it is a major impact to the area. And again, on a vacant piece of ground, that's not, $1,600 is not a very significant impact.
And one other thing I might add, and again, we can talk more at the public hearing, but you could kind of tell from that site that is a very challenging site, notwithstanding perhaps different uses and such that might be around it. Just the site itself and how you access it at one point, and it's a long site, it has some terrain issues, so it's a tough site, just another factor that we would toss out in the mix for consideration in terms of offering this sort of abatement for the investment.
So you're saying the 45 is like kind of the starting place?
Yes.
And based on the sliding scale, they qualify for?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's a great question, Commissioner Townsend. I was just saying to Doug that when you start, there's no point of reference. And so it's very difficult to understand how it works. So that's why I was just saying I'd recommend like EcoDevo 101 for new commissioners, just so you can get that framework in place. Because it's hard to know, but it's a great question.
Any further questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alvey?
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you very much. We look forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We now have items 6 and 7 rather, on our agenda tonight. Those are the blue sheet items, so they are on the separate agenda that you received after the original. Item number 6 is a request to approve a resolution approving a real estate purchase by Loretto Properties at 736 Minnesota Avenue. I believe Mr. Bach and Mr. Brakovich are going to present this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is a very exciting project that we're able to bring forward tonight. I know it's one that Commissioner McKernan is very aware of. George, can I get you to pull that up on the screen? There's just a site layout. The area that we're talking about is on Minnesota Avenue. It's our property. It's the old EPA building, the one that we have held ownership of since the EPA moved over to the current facility that they've abandoned in our downtown.
No comment.
I won't try to trudge anything up by my comments from that. Anyway, Loretto is looking at acquiring our property, and they are proposing a development where they come in and have another building that they've acquired on the avenue. The structure of the deal is one where we would sell our building for $100,000 to them. They're committing to spend $1 to $1.5 million on the buildings internally and the fronts of them, such like that, fixing them up, occupying, and I'll let them speak to that point. In exchange for that, they've asked us to move within our current CMIP plan, advance what we currently have in our 17 and 18 budgets to our 14-15 budgets to finish the streetscape that comes down from basically 7.5 to all the way over to 8th Street, which this is about a $1 to $1.5 million streetscape venture for us. As we currently have it in our budget at $1.7 million, we've gone through it, worked through it. We believe it's 1.4, maybe a little less than that, but until we get into it, the cost of that streetscape is so high because there's so much infrastructure within the streets and such like that as you come down to that area. The concept behind that is one where they're investing to make the buildings look like they did from times past, really to continue our streetscape so it looks like it does as we did down at the intersection of 7th and Minnesota. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to James Arkell and Joe Reardon, who is representing the developer on this, and let them talk a little bit about their project.
Okay. My name's James Arkell, and I'm with Loretto Companies, and one of our divisions is Loretto Commercial Development. Another division of our company is Loretto Charities, and that's what brought me down to this area originally. We work with Little Sisters of the Lamb, and I was down here doing quite a bit of work with them, and I got to know Greg Kindle and a few other people in this room, and the opportunity came up to buy the Katz building. We had no idea how long it would take to buy the Katz building. I found out from our general contractor that we originally started looking at that in December of 2012. As you can see from the picture, we finally have a dumpster out in front of there now. We got involved after we saw the wonderful work you guys did on the Chamber building. We were very impressed. Greg proposed that we buy the Katz building. We were looking for a project like this to get involved with. We are very excited at the prospect of being involved with the unified government and restoring that part of the city, bringing families back. I keep seeing these pictures of families walking up and down Minnesota Avenue, and our charity is very committed to strengthening families, and we think this is a great opportunity to be involved not just from an economic standpoint, but from a just future value to, we want to create an area that families can come walk around. With the Katz building, I think we might hit that number with just that one. It keeps getting more and more expensive, but we have committed to do it right, and we're, as the weeks go by and I meet with the architects and the general contractors, we are completely taking it back to historical, what it looked like. We're pulling that horrible silver awning off of it, restoring the facade. As my contractor keeps telling me, you're basically going to have a brand new building on the inside, and we're going to make the outside look just like it did, so it will hopefully complement the work you guys have done on the Chamber building across the street. After we got committed to that building, then the offer was made to go to the building next door. The vision we have basically for both buildings, currently we're working on filling the Katz building. We've had a lot of interest. There's a lot of people excited at what's going on here. We're kind of the first ones in line at the buffet. We're willing to take a chance, and we realize that this is a long-term commitment. We're not looking, I've joked with some of these guys before that someday I want to sit, my boy's 4 right now, when he's older and say, Daddy and Papa helped build this when it's back to its former glory. We are currently working with Greg, and again, there are a number of people very excited at the opportunity to be in these buildings. We don't know exactly who's going to go in which buildings, but like we've presented to Doug and Commissioner Kiernan, we're kind of wanting to use this as a model home, if you will, of redevelopment. We're talking to a number of for-profits and nonprofits. The only tenant we have committed to the Katz building right now is a nonprofit coffee shop. So not a big moneymaker, but we think it's going to be a tremendous asset for the community. So that's kind of where we stand. And it's not often that in a construction project, your neighbors are very thrilled to see a dumpster in front, that it's that causes that much improvement in the building that you're getting thanked for putting a dumpster out front. So we look forward to completing these projects as well as any other opportunities that come up in the future.
Well, I'll open up for comments or questions or discussion, but just let me say, for the record, now I am biased about this because it is my district after all, but I have been so thoroughly impressed every time I've talked to Mr. Arkell with his vision and his passion and his commitment for not only doing this project, but for doing it right and doing it in such a way that it really is going to be the springboard for additional development down the road. And so I am absolutely thrilled with the prospect of having this development, and I am so grateful that you have come to our downtown and said, let me help you fix that up. It is really a blessing, and I truly do think that it capitalizes on our transit center, it capitalizes on the bus route, it could be the seed for a lot of additional things to move forward beyond just the 2 buildings you're starting with, and so I thoroughly enjoy the thinking about the opportunities that could be ahead of us. Any other questions or comment or discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, gentlemen. I had a question about in section 12 of the presentation. My understanding is the UG is going to sell the property for $100,000, and you as the buyers agreed to rehab up to an investment between $1 million and $1.5 million, substantially rehabilitate. What would be the definition of substantially rehabilitate this? How do we know when that mark has been hit?
Commissioner, I think and I'll let James explain his vision. I think he does it better than anyone. But I think the goal has always been to be at a place where the interior of these buildings would be at a quality like or better than the chamber rehabilitation across the street.
Okay.
And so that's the intention, and we believe that an investment, and the commitment is to make a minimum investment of $1 million up to $1.5 million, and James, in working with his contractor, believes that amount of money in those 2 buildings would reach that kind of, you never know because there may be more costs involved as you get into the buildings, but there's general belief that an investment of between $1 million and $1.5 million in those 2 buildings and that square footage would take you to that place.
Okay.
So the unified government would be holding us to that dollar commitment as evidence of the rehabilitation, and then the quality I'll let James speak to in greater detail.
And that was one of the questions, I guess, or the thoughts that was concerning me. If you reached that number and you still had not gotten to the place that the building looked like or was functional as you desire it to be, then where do we go from there?
Well, to be honest, that number was set by you guys. My commitment financially is to make the buildings as they're supposed to be. If it takes, this is based on our estimates, but we've had a number of things come up, and rather than doing it the inexpensive way, I'd rather do it the right way. So I'm not limiting what I'm willing to spend. That was just a number that we came up with, so that, we are trying to attract the type of clients that would want to be in the chamber building. We think that with the history and the architecture of the building, and we've already had great deal of interest from architecture firms, engineering firms, the types of jobs that we think will really kind of lift up the district. So I'm not going to skimp in order to meet that number. I want to make sure that the building is done right. Both buildings are done right.
Yes, ma'am.
So where are we going to get the $1.4 million we need for landscaping that was scheduled for really 17 and 18? Where are we going to get that for this year?
If you direct us to do so, then when we're building the CMIP plan, coming in for presentation this summer, then we'll rotate projects around to match for this. And I can't say that I sit here today and say I know which ones they will be. I mean, the money that would be this year's engineering cost, that's a couple $100,000. But what would come next year is looking at projects that previously planned for 2015 and push something probably out here and push this up. You know, it's, I would say, operating from the perspective that we usually do when we look at something to say if we can get grant money to move a project up or to leverage significant investment into a neighborhood or a different part of town, which is why we promote this forward to think it's a good investment.
Yes, well, so the project sounds great. And I think, are you using tax credits on your renovation?
No.
I was just curious. Why not?
Well, we actually have a construction schedule, and we want to get them done, and we don't want to wait around for tax credits.
Okay. So the total investment on the building itself is 1.2?
Between the two buildings right now, with the Katz building, including purchase price and renovations that we're looking at, we're at about 900. Then with the purchase price,
So $900,000.
just on the Katz building, next door.
And that's with the renovation and the purchase price?
Correct.
Okay. So you want to put in, you bought and you want to purchase the building and renovate it and invest like $900,000 in it, which is what you've done. And then you want us to put 1.4 million into the landscaping on the outside of it.
Correct. Well, completing the streetscape down to the end of our block. It currently starts at 7th Street and then stops basically in front of our building. So what we were talking about was continuing that on to help when the front of our building is completed, we'd like for the streetscape to match up.
So why is the 1.4 million in streetscape so important that it can't wait till, 17 or 18? Why is that so important?
Commissioner, it's a matter of timing on the construction for the building. So the Katz building, Loretto has already purchased, and I can say a bit of good news for the committee tonight is the Katz building for the first time in decades is not tax delinquent as a result of the purchase. So there's already great progress in that respect. But the intention is to have the Katz building completed in January of next year. And if if you allow the purchase of the old EPA building to move forward, the intention would be to complete that in no less than 24 months after the approval to purchase would occur. I believe that Loretto Commercial Properties thinks that the best way to lease these properties up, which is they'd be bringing 48,000 square foot online, is to have the improvement of the streetscape, which everyone has seen at 7th and Minnesota, complement the investment that they're making to both the interior and the exterior of the buildings and the timing in which they want to complete construction.
Wouldn't it be easier to go out and to SID and TIF these properties and get tenants with the assurance that when the properties are full of tenants, that you'll be able to use that revenue to do those improvements instead of taking revenue from something else right now?
Right. Commissioner, great thoughts about using tools, and we're certainly open to those ideas. I think that the driving force for Loretto right now is to move as quickly as they possibly can to complete the construction project. They do intend to take advantage of NRA, but in our initial discussions with economic development staff as well as with Wyandotte Economic Development, there really is not enough increment here yet to look at a CID. You'll see in our agreement for purchase that we're open to those ideas, but we believe it's probably farther on in the entire life of the project before a CID or a TIF would generate enough revenue to make a significant difference in something in the future. The desire really is to make the investment today, which they're prepared to do, and to try to get these buildings back to life as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
I just guess that usually when we get development deals, the norm is that you have a tenant. It's not just that you're going to come in and fix up a building, is that there's a tenant that's going to go in there, and we kind of have an idea who we're fixing it up for. And that's the leverage on the investment.
Well, look, we certainly, James has done a great job and is actively meeting with potential tenants for the Katz building. There's some, as he's mentioned, some very good interest there. The commitment by Loretto is to move forward even before they have leased up anything in the two buildings and start to make rehabilitation investment now. They will do that on the Katz building. They've already purchased that building, and in fact, they've done the architectural work, and they have A.L. Huber as their contractor on that building. So their intention is they will proceed forward with that. I think the broader vision is to try to move forward on the building next door, which they think has great potential, and then perhaps to continue on from there. But their commitment is to move forward with investment today. Mr. Elton?
Yeah, and maybe I understand the concern about rotating projects from other years to try and generate some more quick development of this area. If I were a potential tenant, it would seem to me that if I were looking at leasing property, leasing an office or of either one of these buildings, knowing that there was then going to be another streetscape project, construction project after I tried to move in, that could certainly affect my ability to attract customers or to really utilize the space. So I understand the concerns about taking money that's committed to other projects and upfronting the cost now. It seems to me that the UG in the past has been flexible in its capital improvements funds to make sure that a project like this can move forward. And I would definitely think in this situation, because so much of downtown KCK is laid dormant for so long, we have an excellent opportunity. I think we ought to move forward on this.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Commissioner Murguia brought up one of the questions that I wanted to get clarified in terms of the expected cost for the UG to do the streetscape. So that was 1.4 or thereabout. And we expect to try to get that from some other place in the CMIP budget, right? But we don't know where that is, right, at this point? Could you show me again the area that's being considered for the streetscape? Are we just talking about right in front of Minnesota Avenue or a larger area than that? And is it a possibility that, Mr. Arkell, you would still consider going through with this project if maybe the size was limited for the streetscape area we're talking about, just so that we don't have to take money from a project that we haven't identified yet to do this for right now? Not that we would never do it, but
George, if
at a
you'd run the
later time.
arrow up there, it runs about halfway down the block, so that's, we've already done this area, about to here, so then we start there and move all the way down to 8th Street, and this actually, the budget you have gets us through the 8th Street intersection. They didn't actually ask for that. That's a recommendation that came back from our engineering department, that if we're going to go in and go through this, it is more cost efficient for us to move all the way through the intersection now and fixed everything there. They said they wanted to get us down to 8th Street, you know, and that gets the construction work done, gets the streetscape done in front of them. It's a, you know, knowing that that was our plan to get through the 8th Street intersection, with this budget, it makes a lot more sense for us to do it all in this chunk and not leave that last intersection piece and then do it later. You know, as we get into it, there is that opportunity to value engineer out some of those points. They're not holding us to a dollar figure. They're holding us to a project work. And it's kind of like, that's how we come through there. It was, as we did the other end of this area, you know, we got into a lot of different things that we're hopeful that don't happen on this end of the street. So there is a fair amount of contingency built in our budget, but we have to do that when we design like this.
Do you have a copy of our 2014 CMIP budget?
I do have, not in front of me, but I have one.
That would be helpful to see what we have currently budgeted for 2014.
Did you want us to get a copy of it now?
Well, I mean, if we're going to spend 1.4 million, I think it's a great project, don't get me wrong. I think it's fantastic, and I'm confident you'll do a good job. I'm just concerned, it's really not even a dollar for dollar match. It's 900,000 versus 1.4 million. And then in addition to that, it is, if we do this, which I'm okay with, but then some 1.4 million's got to come from somewhere else. And I just want to know if we're going to move things around in the CMIP budget, where that 1.4 million's going to come from.
Let me clarify one thing. You're saying 900,000. Now, that's the CATS building, right?
That's just the CATS building.
There's two
Actually, by the
buildings
time we
here.
factor in the use,
Oh, so
the
what's the
building
other-
the building next door, we had our contractor going through it earlier, or late last week, and we're looking at least another $500,000 on that one.
So
Just to
that
get it
will
up
take
in.
place, and all of this will take place in 24 months.
Correct.
And that's, how much did you say total again?
Well, we're working on a budget for we keep referring to it as the UG building, but the old EPA building. The purchase price plus what it's going to take, the plan on that one is to have a tenant before we start construction on it, and then build it out to suit the tenant. But it's going to be a minimum of $400,000, which will put us right at the 1.4 million when you combine the two buildings.
Not to mention the fact they are paying us $100,000 for our building, and it's a building that we currently need to do more maintenance work on, and should program in that area. If not, it'll become a bit larger cost center for us if we hold on this project.
Well, you're down to a 1.3 million. I mean, I'm just saying, the reality is, I think it's a good project, but we have to come up with $1.4 million for the difference. And I'm good with that, I just want to know where that's going to come from.
Well, understand, it's not like we're coming out with that much money. I mean, it's that much they're in our debt area. That's from our debt funding that we come out with. I don't know if that's what you were going to say, Lou, but
We can only
came up
issue
here.
so much debt.
That's
Lou
right.
has been adamant about that, so
That's
we
right.
can't be
And
just issuing
and that's why I
willy-nilly debt
said-
out there.
is I'd go through and prioritize, and the recommended budget that would come forward would be a way to put in that amount of, if there's additional 1 million that's in the 2015 budget from this, then find something to push out probably in the find something to push out 2015 budget. And we have the capital budget here. I don't know that we're going to go through every capital project today and come up with that priority.
No, I just wanted
wouldn't
to see what
recommend
was
that.
on the list, because it's helpful just to see what's on the list, not to necessarily make the decision. Do you have to have this decision tonight to move forward?
No.
You've got a sort of a time frame. Could you know at the next Economic Development Standing Committee? Could we vote on it then? So we would have some time to, I'd like to talk to Commissioner McKiernan. It's his district, it sounds like a great project.
Commissioner, and I think Doug clarified this, we didn't come up with a dollar figure for your investment. We would love to have you go all the way to 8th Street. We were asking for this rehab to occur in front of the buildings that the investment's being made at, as James said, this acts as their model home. And if you really want to have a model home, and I think this really needs to happen on Minnesota Avenue, you need to have a model home that shows what it can be, because the vision's been lost on a lot of parts of Minnesota Avenue as it exists today. Seeing is believing. So in a spirit of partnership, at the beginning of this, as James came forward to negotiate, really, was the idea is that they're making investment in these buildings. If the streetscape could match the vision of the buildings themselves, it's obviously going to benefit everyone, because they're going to be able to get tenants excited in downtown. So the dollar figures for your investment, we hope it's much less. We really, the dollar figures are not our dollar figures. Our dollar figures are what our investment's going to be. And furthermore, we'd love to see you go to 8th, but if you only could go to the alley on Minnesota Avenue, I mean, we've talked in principle, that gets our model home going. But I will say that, I'm certain that Loretto would want to see more of this happen, because their investment, as James said, is for the long haul on the corridor. They will have made a large investment on the corridor, and they will intend to continue to be investors.
Absolutely, and we're not, plan is to push forward with construction if you approve the sale. We've been pretty relaxed on the scheduling of when that would happen. I guess the way I've always seen it when we've been discussing it is, it was something that's planned to be done anyways. It's something that's going to benefit the block. We would just like to see it pushed up a little bit. That's our thinking, and when I've been talking to potential tenants, telling them about it and walking them down the street and showing them what you guys have already done, just a little bit in the other direction, gets them excited. It gets me excited to see how just simple projects like putting new sidewalks in and putting a new facade on a building gets people who care about this area very excited.
And certainly, I think we lost a tremendous opportunity by only taking what the Tiger Grant out to the current chamber building, because you've got what could be what is. And there's a stark difference on that block. And I think we really lost the opportunity while we had everything already torn up anyway to finish that out. Personally, I think we should have planned that a little bit better, and that I didn't have anything to do with that. But I think we should have finished that streetscape out at the time. In terms of myself, if we only finished it to the alley, how much of a difference would that make in terms of the total dollar investment? Because we already have a line in the sand at one point in the block. We can just shift that line 400 yards further down the block, and then next year we'll get it all the way to the intersection. What I'd like to do is find a way, in terms of a compromise, that we can move this forward without negative impacts spilling over into other projects as little as possible. But I would hate for us to lose the opportunity to synergize with a potential development that could unlock much more in the downtown.
Commissioner McKiernan. Yeah, and I guess I just want to reiterate, I just think if this project had come forward before the adoption or before putting together the CMIP, it would have been already front-loaded. In other words, we would have made this a priority to make sure that this happened all the way down to 8th Street. The fact that it has come to us now, that the CMIP can be adjusted, and I don't think, Commissioner McGee, you're suggesting that you would vote against this very, wonderful project coming forward based upon what might get shifted around. And so if the presumption is you would vote for it knowing that we would have to shift some CMIP funds around, it would seem to me we can move forward with a vote today and then decide how to shift those funds later.
But alternatively, we could, if there's no time urgency of making the decision tonight, if we have a month, we certainly could go back and look at alternative pricing. We could look at alternative plans. And we could consider how that might impact and what that might impact in terms of dollars and projects, and have a clearer vision of that before we come back for an actual vote on the agreement. Yes, ma'am.
I hope that would be an option, because as I read this, I was very optimistic about this. But there are two pieces, I think, of vital information here that were not here spelled out, and one was the cost of what the UG's obligation would be and how we're going to finance it. And I think we need the additional time to do the homework and see where that might come from, especially since we put a lot of time into constructing the budgets and what are going to be priorities. This just a little bit out of the blue. But I hope it's a project that we can do. I used to sell a lot of records in that Katz building. So I'd love to see it revitalized in there, but I think we just have to be smart and practical about it. So if it's not an encumbrance to you and what you want to do, I think it would be additional time well spent to look at it.
Go ahead.
If I could ask, if we were to vote tonight, what would be the process by which we would actually make a modification to the CMIP budget? When would it happen? Would it be a commission activity at a regularly scheduled commission meeting, or just what?
The final action that you would take for the CMIP budget would come in July, when you're reviewing the budget. What we'll do is we'll sit down and go through all the different priorities that have been submitted from the department, which is we're in the process now, going through all the different priorities we have for projects that are out there, look at them, determine what we can finance under our current debt load coming into for 2015. Assuming that it's about the same where we've been, then we'd need to shuffle that amount of project one up and one back to make it work. The alternatives we'd have in building that would be to say, okay, I know an estimated budget of $1.4 million to get through the 8th Street intersection. We could reduce that down by $500,000, not go as far, or some number less than that as we work through the project and build on it. And you would be able to reach a final conclusion by the end of July to know where your priority is going to be for this. So
Well, I guess that's my point.
bring it
is
back
that
in August.
If we take action tonight, or if we take action 30 days from now, roughly, we still won't finalize the CMIP budget until July. And so I think there's nothing we can do here at this committee that binds us to modifying the CMIP budget. So, I understand the consternation as we're sort of being asked to take a leap of faith that we will be able to figure out how to rearrange the future spending. But as David said, I can't imagine that if this had come prior to us establishing the CMIP budgets for those outlying years, we would have not been able to figure it out. And we would have, figured out a way to do this project, which we have already committed to do, as I understand it. It's just a question of when. So we're just moving money from one year to another, and I really don't know that we can't figure that out.
I would agree with that.
So then the question before us tonight is we have a request to approve the purchase agreement as outlined. We can entertain a motion for that, or we could put this off.
Make a motion for approval.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the request, the purchase agreement as outlined, with the understanding that the final CMIP will be determined as a part of the regular budget process moving forward, and that we'll try to find the most equitable solution to the CMIP expenditures. Any further discussion on that? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's say this goes forward. I guess what I'm still having some consternation about is that we, by that vote, are not binding the commission to go forward in the event that other commissioners have another view, or that we can't identify what we want to delay or shift in the CMIP budget to accommodate this.
Well, your action, we would go forward to the full commission, so the other commissioners would have a say and could voice in on this or disagree or vote for it. But the action would be one that binds us to move forward with doing the streetscape work in front of their building.
By our vote tonight.
Well, the full final action when it goes to the full commission would, yes. This would be a recommendation approving this. The actual agreement that would go before the full commission would say we would do the streetscape work in 2015. Now, if you don't do it, I mean, and Ken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, the outside of this is, if we decide and we just don't follow through with the work next year, we don't find a way to do it, don't move through it, they've bought the building, they're going to own the other building, they just don't have to go ahead and spend the money on the project. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our investment in the streetscape guarantees their investment in the two buildings, and also eliminates that extra $100,000 between the agreed value and the purchase price. So those obligations on behalf of Loretto would be gone. They would not have to invest any more money in the buildings. They would not have to pay that.
So it's really not it's kind of loose. I mean, it's from that perspective is, well, Ken just said it. Our investment in the streetscape assures their investment in the buildings. If we don't make our investment, they don't have to make their investment.
So then it becomes a timing issue. And by that I mean, Loretto would own the buildings. If we don't do the streetscape at the time we're talking about now, let's say we don't identify projects in the CMIP to delay in favor of moving this forward, it's a timing issue. So that if we came back and said next year, hey, we can afford this, then possibly Loretto would, at that time, reconsider doing the upgrades that they're talking about now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it worked from that. I mean, I think what we're committing to by this, Commissioner, is that we really have a good faith effort that we're going to get into our CMIP budget and try to make this adjustment work. But if we just absolutely went ahead forward to it and couldn't do it, it would be very apparent to them this summer that we're not going to move forward with it, and that would probably stop them from where they're going forward with things. But it really, I think, by us doing this, you're directing me from a good faith perspective to say, hey, Mr. Administrator, get into the budget and figure out a way to make this a priority, because it leverages another $1.5 million to $2 million worth of investment that's probably going to happen down on the avenue by us spending $1 to $1.4 million by doing this.
And how do we know we have the ability, if I remember right, prior to this year, we pretty much eliminated our CMIP budget because we didn't have any money. We weren't moving anything forward. Weren't there a couple years in there we didn't do anything? We pushed everything back?
Well, you're thinking of our capital equipment side of it. In our CMIP projects, we're still funding out about $13 million annually.
Okay.
So that's what we finance that much. I think, Lou, 13 to 14, wasn't that the number we're at from general
So it sounds
fund
like you've already
projects?
looked at them, and in general, all the CMIP projects we have for 2014 are not time-sensitive and are flexible enough to switch with a project like this.
Well, I'm going to say that I believe there's some that we could consider for pushing.
Okay. Well, if there's some that aren't, I just want to make sure the priorities are, the project's great. I just want to make sure that, I don't know what is on our CMIP list, so I don't know if if those projects are leveraging funds. I don't know if those projects are time sensitive. And then we get ourselves into, and I've been down this road, where we get ourselves into budget and nobody wants to, everybody's like, wait a minute, this project was supposed to be in 14 because this developer was going to do this, or this project was supposed to be then because that way I could do this, what I was going to do. Whatever the commissioner in that district or all of us had talked about in the past. So if you, though, are saying, Doug, as the administrator, that you believe there's some flexible spending in there up to 1.4 million, then there's no reason to continue the conversation.
Lou?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's a policy decision by the commission. Currently, there's $13.6 million in the 2015 budget. The CMIP plan, historically, it's an evolving plan. Each year, the commission reviews the plan and makes, I'll say, amends the CMIP for the next 5 years. And certainly projects that are in my expectation is that there's projects in this 2015 plan that are, even if this project didn't come forward, would be moved to out years, or there'd be other projects that would be, for some reason, be viewed as a higher priority and would be moved to the 2015. So it's a plan that each year the governing body looks at and says, what are our priorities? This is what it is today, but have things changed? Have the government finances maybe changed? Can we afford more, or can we afford less? And I think it's an appropriate action by the commission. You know, it's not a document that's in stone that cannot be altered. And
Similar to that is if, like the Tiger grants or other grants, if they came in, some of them, we landed them for next year, we would be coming forward this summer saying, hey, we recommend to move forward with this project because we spend this $1 million, we're going to leverage another 3 or 4. You know, and that's the kind of fluid thing we work with our CMIP each year. So, And to that point, if we just can't get to it, we may come back and say, well, we're not going to go all the way through the intersection because we could only find about $800,000 worth of moving it around. But
All I'm concerned
the
about is you
CMIP
think-
project is a very dynamic, it's a 5-year plan, and that's what it is. It's a plan. And I give a lot of credit to Bill Heatherman, who's in the room, and other staff that go through and work on this and refine it every year. And, you know, and we find different ways that what projects have to be done. There's other projects that something happened to, the integrity of a road or something over the course of a winter, we got to shuffle it. And as Lou said, we'll be shuffling more than $1 to $2 million probably around.
Yeah,
If you think that there's that much flexibility in the CMIP budget, I trust your judgment.
We can work it. You may not like the recommendation.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I'm just saying, I've been around now for a few budgets, not all of them, but a few of them, and I've never seen that level of flexibility. But if you say that there is, and we won't be compromising other projects bringing the same leverage and the same level of benefit, then I'm good with that.
I can figure it out.
Okay, we're good.
Any further discussion? There has been a motion and a second to approve the purchase agreement. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alvey.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
We have You know, you're right, Commissioner Townsend. You can shuffle your papers faster than I can shuffle my little iPad here, so.
Well, everything has its place, though.
Okay.
That's just the way it works, but everything has its place.
All right, we have item number 7 on our agenda. The final item on our agenda is an item that we actually discussed last month. It is the request to approve a resolution to have Lane 4 market the former Indian Springs Mall site. At that time, last month, this was voted on and did not move forward. And it was suggested that if the people from Lane 4 wanted to consider the agreement, that they could bring it back again for further discussion this month. Mr. Brakovich.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. We had the opportunity, so we were here earlier this month on the 7th. We had the opportunity to do some follow-up with commissioners that had questions, as well as the district commissioner, to get their input in terms of what they thought their constituents were going to look for in this, at this site. And so what we wanted to do is take a look back at the 2 documents we brought before you last time. One was the narrative agreement, and there didn't seem to be much discussion or discourse with that document. More of the discussion was on the conceptual design. And so one of the things we wanted to from a staff perspective, we wanted to clarify tonight was, again, the 3 conceptual designs that were put out by Lane 4 and the architect that they hired to do that was more just a mass and scale. You know, how many square feet of retail, or how many square feet of commercial, how many potential units on multifamily or senior housing or assisted. And again, it was just to give us a sense of the scale that should the market bear those types of end developments, what we could expect to see. And again, it was, I think the big picture, though, was to show this mixed use, horizontally integrated across the site. And so I'm going to turn it over to Hunter and Owen and let them kind of talk about the feedback they received and where we perceive going from with that feedback incorporated.
I think there was one more issue that Commissioner Walters raised, and that is that he wanted to make sure that we didn't short sell the property, or, you know, in terms of the development, and wanted, if I'm right, that you want to make sure that this remains kind of a lead property, high-quality property that can attract the kind of investment that area really deserves.
That's correct.
Thank you, Commissioners. Hunter Harris with Lane 4 Property Group. Thanks for having us in again this evening. Pleased to be back before you. We had a great opportunity to dialogue with several of the commissioners and the mayor about the vision for Indian Springs, and unfortunately, we did not have that opportunity prior to seeing you on the 7th. Hindsight being 20/20 always, I wish I would have said that evening and brought some of the preliminary documents of where we start on other projects in the unified government, such as the 39th and Rainbow Corridor, and what our early conceptual images were for that project, and then where we are today. And I'm sure they vary quite drastically from just a napkin sketch, and then after providing input from all the key stakeholders on those projects, they evolved to something that we're very proud of and we feel will be very special projects for the community. And we share that with the Indian Springs project. We look forward to additional dialogue, and we'll use our best efforts to market the property to various users that we feel could have a very impactful, long-lasting change on the area in a very positive way. And Owen, anything that I left off there?
No, you did a good job, and I think just to the point of short selling, yeah, we agree. I mean, our job is to vet that out. Our job is to see, what potential there is out there. And, one thing that's certain is that the property is not being worked right now. It's not being marketed. And I think, I'm a little prejudiced, but I think Lane 4 is a good option because we're out there, we're talking to all kinds of people, and I think we can vet that out, and I think we can come back and give reports and keep everybody up to date on what's going on, the good news right along with any bad news. And, we're optimistic about our ability to get that property back on the tax roll, so to speak. And you look around town and you look at what's happened to Antioch Mall, Blue Ridge Mall, Bannister Mall, even Corbin Park, which had its little problem there for a while. Now it's coming back. Metcalf South, there's some new life being breathed into that right now in hope. So I think good things happen to good properties, and certainly Indian Springs is very, very well located.
And to be clear, if I may, Mr. Commissioner McKiernan?
Absolutely.
To be clear, that this agreement is simply to give you an opportunity to try and market the property to see what is available. That it's not, you're not presenting us a done deal with a development plan. It's just, look, let's get some traction on this, as Commissioner Townsend said last time. Let's get some traction on this. What kind of traction? And you're going to be doing that for unified government. Is that correct?
That's accurate, correct. However, we look forward to taking that one step further, because we want to do, when we're out marketing this, obviously it's in our best interest to create a project that we can go put together and bring back before you here. So it's in our interests are aligned along with yours to do something that we're all going to be very proud of.
And that's exciting to us, and that's important that, we're motivated, we're incentivized. And if it were easy, the property would be already productive and something would have been done several years ago or whenever. But so, we like the way that it's structured. It's exciting to us.
Yes, ma'am.
So isn't the intent of the intent of this tonight is just to give you control over the property? So, I don't know how else to describe it, so that you can go out and see what you can do with it without another developer or someone else swooping in and you doing all the work and someone else doing all the development. Isn't part of it that you control the site? Who wants to go out and try to build a beautiful site and put it all together and not control it, and then have another developer come in and swoop it out from underneath you?
Well, I don't know, Commissioner McGee. Well, no, obviously we'll be marking the site, but I would say that there's a decent chance that we'll be approached potentially by other developers who say, we would like to do this specific use on the site, and we would report that back to you to say that we have someone who's interested in doing this project. It'll be on this portion of the site. Here's how we feel it fits into a master plan per se that we would work on with the unified government for the site, or here's how we need to adapt it for this project, and present you with those options. So our efforts in marketing the property don't necessarily preclude another developer from bringing forward a great project for Indian Springs.
Right, but if you want to control the whole site and develop a quality master plan for the whole site, you need to control the whole site and decide how that's going to be put together, so that there's not 3 or 4 different of you working in a different direction, so that it becomes truly the quality development that people want. Is that right?
Yes, I'd say so. For example,
I know what I'm talking about.
No, actually, it's a very good question. If we're out, talking to a significant user, so to speak, and they want 5 acres or 15 acres, and we're spending the time talking to them, marketing the site to them, answering their questions, going back and forth maybe between that maybe their headquarters are out of town, and we're going to that length to get them to the site and help them be attracted to the site. Then to have somebody swoop in, as you say, and take them away, and because they're going to come in and do the entire site, could be problematic. Right. And but we want to make it clear that we're very inclusive and that we will work with other developers. Again, our goal is to get this site up and running for the UG. That's what you have charged us with, and that's our main objective.
And Commissioner, just maybe a point of clarity, when you said, to have control, I mean, ultimately, the unified government stays the owner of the property, and it's at our sole discretion to approve any project that's brought forward. But you're right, the agreement would give them the exclusive rights to act on our behalf, both in a brokerage role as well as a developer role.
Right, so if you did come up, say you only developed part of the site, I'll just make something up, because I don't know what else, I have to use an example. So let's say you go out there, and how many acres is Indian Springs? It's a lot of acres.
100.
It's 100 acres. Okay, so you come back, you have 100 acres, and you come back and say, I'm going to put a Home Depot and a Target there. I would guess that the commission would question that would be a very comprehensive quality development on 100 acres, when you may only need 30 acres to do that. And from what I've heard over the last few years about what people, it's not my district, but from what people would like to see there is a more mixed-use sort of development where you're encompassing lots of like residential and business and other kinds of things. So we still have that right, correct? That if you come in front of us and propose something that we don't like, we at that time can tell you, no, we don't like that, try again. And you'll keep doing that. How long is this, how long do you get to control that site?
2-year period.
Oh, so then at the end of 2 years, if we're still, could you terminate that agreement prior to 2 years if you just were?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Either party, so.
Yeah, either party could, if they were dissatisfied with the...
I think that the agreement will cover a lot of things, and from our standpoint, protect us in that situation I just described, where we're maybe going back and forth and doing this and doing that. Our hope is that we'll be protected in some sort of way and be rewarded for our efforts.
And to your point, Commissioner McGeer, we heard loud and clear from the commissioners that we met with that they too share the view that this needs to be a site that contains a mix of uses, so our efforts won't be singular in just attracting retail users for the site. We would also want to go out and find great residential and other types of uses to bring forward, as it is a very large area.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Walters.
I want to thank Lane 4 for the time they've spent between the last time we got together and tonight, in giving additional information to various commissioners, and myself included. I won't repeat all the comments I made last time, but those are the concerns, and I think after meeting with Lane 4, I think we're on the same wavelength as being something of, looking for that property to be a transformational development in our Midtown area. And I think some of the impressions I had from last time were that there was a chance that it might kind of lose that focus. But after talking with representatives of Lane 4, I think I have gained a lot of confidence in their vision, and I think we can work together very well on the overall development of this property. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, discussion? The request before us is to approve this agreement with Lane 4.
Move for approval?
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alvey?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Murgia?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
And I'll check with Mr. Bach. That is the last item on our agenda.
Is it?
We are adjourned.